I still remember the chill that ran down my spine when my girlfriend asked, "Who is that man right behind you?" Let me take you back to that night. I was 15 and the world felt simple. My first girlfriend, Maya, lived just a couple of blocks away in our peaceful, tree-lined neighborhood. Since I didn't have a strict curfew, I often walked to her house after dark. One uneventful Thursday, I started that familiar stroll. It was late, but I wasn't worried. Then the sounds began. At first, it was just the rustling of a hedge, like someone was brushing past it. I glanced back but saw nothing, so I just walked a little faster. A moment later, a sharp snap, a twig breaking underfoot. This time I stopped and turned completely around. The street was empty, just silent houses and those dark, shadowy bushes separating the sidewalks from the properties. A wall of leaves that could hide anything. I picked up my pace, almost jogging now, Maya's house finally in sight. Then came the footsteps, light, quick, and undeniably close. I spun around, still moving, and saw no one. Nothing. I called Maya, my voice shaky, and she answered immediately. I told her I was hearing things, that I was freaked out. As I rounded the hedge lining her driveway, I saw her staring down from her bedroom window. She waved from behind the glass, phone to her ear. I waved back, relief washing over me. Then her voice cut through the night, sharp with panic. "Who is that man right behind you?" I turned and saw a grown man, crouched low, not 10 feet away. I screamed and sprinted for the front door, pounding on the wood. He grabbed me, his arm locking around my neck, but just as quickly, he released his grip and vanished into the darkness. Maya's mom yanked the door open, her face a mask of confusion and fear. She pulled me inside and slammed the door shut. I was gasping, my heart hammering against my ribs. They let me stay the night for obvious reasons, and she drove me home in the morning. I never took that walk again. It was a violently stormy night, the kind that usually lulled me to sleep. My family was scattered through the house. My parents watching TV in the living room, my sister gaming upstairs, and me in my room. The calm shattered with a monstrous bang on my window. I leapt up. Through the rain-blurred glass, I saw a figure outside. He started pounding on the pane, his muffled screams begging for help. I cracked the window open, the storm roaring in my ears. "I'm hurt, please," he yelled. The rain was so loud I had to scream back, "Go to the front door." Then I slammed my window shut and ran to get my dad. "There's a man outside, he's hurt," I yelled. As if on cue, frantic knocking and shouts for help erupted from the front door. My dad moved to open it, but I grabbed his arm. "Wait," I said, a cold dread settling in my gut. The phone rang, the caller ID flashing our neighbor's name. My dad answered, and his face went pale. "No way," he breathed. He hung up and hissed, "Stay away from the door." He didn't explain, he just peered through the window. A man was crouched on the front stoop, pounding on the wood, clutching a large, sharp axe. My dad yelled through the door, "Get away before I call the cops." He was already on the phone with them. The man eventually gave up and disappeared. Our neighbor later told us he'd seen a disheveled man rummaging in his shed and emerging with that axe. The police found him wandering the streets, and the story made the local paper days later. When I was very young, I was watching cartoons in the living room, the volume turned up. Then I heard it. My mom's voice, clear as day, calling my name from the basement. I shouted back, "What?" No answer. I heard it again, so I headed down. The lights were off. Halfway down, I called out for her. Silence. She wasn't down there. I started back up, but before I reached the top, her voice called my name again, rising from the pitch-black basement behind me. I stared into the darkness, my blood running cold. I scrambled up the rest of the stairs, flipping the light on, and ran crying for my real mom. She came rushing down from upstairs, and I sobbed, telling her something downstairs was mimicking her. She assured me she hadn't called for me, but she went down to check to comfort me. It didn't help. I know what I heard. My grandfather shared a story with me recently about an evening walk with his Boston Terrier, Sherry. He lives on a secluded farm, and his daily ritual was a sunset stroll down a dirt path bordering the woods. One evening, they passed a stranger in a large hood, who ignored my grandpa's greeting and walked on. Sherry kept looking back, barking persistently. Annoyed, my grandpa finally turned to see what had her so agitated. The stranger was there, stalking them from behind a tree not far back. My grandpa, an older man but always prepared, quickened his pace, his hand closing around the pepper spray in his coat pocket. He was almost home when he heard the crunch of leaves right behind him. A gloved hand clamped over his mouth and nose, stifling his breath and his scream. He could hear Sherry barking and snapping, her bites likely distracting the attacker. In the struggle, my grandpa managed to wrench the pepper spray free. He unleashed a torrent of it, spraying blindly until the man's grip broke and he stumbled back, screaming. My grandpa, heart pounding, hurried back to the safety of his house as fast as he could. I grew up in a rough part of California, in a neighborhood known for gang activity. My best friend, Leo, lived 2 doors down. When we were 12, we were biking around one night and decided to check out a notorious abandoned house. As we rolled up, Leo pointed to a front window. "Look," he whispered. I pushed my bike closer and squinted. There was a face peering out between the curtains. We stared, frozen. The person wasn't moving at all. We crept closer onto the overgrown driveway. It looked like a fake head, a Halloween prop. We figured someone had broken in to place it there and, being reckless kids, decided to sneak in ourselves to investigate. We hid our bikes and found the back door unlocked. We moved through the dark, dusty house until we reached the living room and that head on the windowsill. The room reeked. I picked it up and immediately dropped it, screaming. It wasn't plastic. It felt like real skin. A dark liquid pooled on the floor where it landed. Blood. It was a real human head. We heard 2 distinct creaks from the ceiling above us. We looked at each other, our mouths agape in shared horror. We bolted out the back door, grabbed our bikes, and fled. We later learned it was the work of a local gang, a gruesome message left for a rival. The person who put it there was probably still in the house when we were coming down the stairs as we escaped. Last year, around 9 p.m., a man knocked on our door. We live in a rural area, so unexpected visitors are rare and unsettling. I got my mom. The man talked about starting a business, asked if she preferred American-made goods, and handed her a sample container of bleach. He went back to his minivan to get a vacuum cleaner. And that's when my mom saw at least 5 other men sitting inside. She told me to run and get the phone. I couldn't find it, so I grabbed a knife and stood ready around the corner. She threw the container outside and yelled at them to get off our property, that she was calling the police. They sped away and we never saw that van again. I've always been an adrenaline junkie. My friend Quinn and I drove 3 hours upstate for a backcountry skiing trip. We parked my truck at the base of a hilly area, unloaded all our gear, and hiked a 1/4 mile to set up camp in a clearing. After setting up the tent, we hiked up to scout the slopes. At one point, we got separated skiing down a big hill. I tried the walkie-talkie, but Quinn didn't answer. While I was walking at the bottom, I ran into another skier. He was friendly, his voice muffled by his ski mask, asking about the best runs and if we were camping. He had skis strapped to his orange backpack. I pointed out the hill I'd just come down and our general campsite direction. He said he and his wife were looking for a spot near other people and asked if I could lead him. Reluctantly, I agreed. I keyed the walkie to tell Quinn I was heading back to camp, but only got static in response. I led the man on a long hike, making small talk. When we finally reached the campsite, I turned and asked, "So where's your wife?" He didn't answer. He just started walking toward me, his pace quickening. A horrible realization hit me. The skis and backpack he was carrying were Quinn's. I panicked, diving into the tent to find my flare gun. He grabbed my leg, and a searing electric pain shot through me, followed by a burning heat. I screamed, managing to pull the flare gun free. I aimed it at him from the tent door, and he immediately backed off, hands in the air. That's when I saw the knife buried deep in my leg. I demanded to know where Quinn was. "Near the bottom of the hill," he stammered. I ordered him to stay put as I called 911, but he ran off while I was on the phone. It felt like an eternity, waiting in the cold with my bleeding leg, until I heard the helicopter. I fired the flare. They airlifted me and found Quinn unconscious in the snow on the hill, also stabbed in the leg and robbed. He'd been trying to reach me on the walkie as he faded. We both recovered, but the trip ended our backcountry adventures. I lived in a small college town. One weeknight, I was out on my front porch late, studying and smoking. A girl I didn't know, from a ground-floor apartment, came home from downtown, clearly drunk. She barely got her door closed when a man appeared out of the shadows and knocked. She opened it and he introduced himself weird for 2:30 a.m. I decided to keep watching. They talked for over 10 minutes. He did creepy things, stroking her hair and inching closer. I made noise with my textbook so he'd know I was there. Eventually, he left as quietly as he came. We called the police. Days later, we worked with a sketch artist. When the sketch was released, tips flooded in. The man was a serial rapist who followed lone women home from bars, sometimes pretending to be a cab driver. This girl was lucky she lived so close. He never got the chance to offer her a ride. I've only used Craigslist once, and it was enough to put me off for life. A guy was selling a ping-pong table. I arranged to pick it up that night, even took the seats out of my truck to fit it. I pulled up, texted him, and saw the door open. I walked to his front door for a handshake, but he seemed to miss the gesture, so I awkwardly put my hand down. In a deep, raspy voice, he told me to follow him to the basement. The whole house had a strange, cottony, smoky smell. The table was in the middle of the room. Suddenly, he said, "Oh shoot, I gotta find the paddles," and ran back upstairs, telling me to wait. I waited, and waited. After about 10 minutes, I started snooping. He had framed pictures, but they were all just of him, alone. One had a dog. Getting more curious, I noticed a half-open drawer in a utility desk in a back room. Inside were old Polaroids. They were horrifying. A girl tied to a chair, her mouth taped shut. Next to them were yellow folders labeled A to Z. I tried to take a picture with my phone, but I had no service. It was time to go. I ran to the basement door and found it locked. As I tried the knob, I heard his raspy voice on the other side, apologizing, saying it was an accident and he'd find the key. I didn't respond. I ran back, grabbed screwdrivers from his desk, and managed to jimmy the lock with the smallest one. I burst out, ran to my car, and drove straight to the police station. I showed them the photos and gave them the address. It was enough to launch an investigation. They later told me he was part of a child pornography ring on the deep web. Why he locked me in there, I'll never know. When I was 14, I babysat a 6-year-old boy named Cody. His parents gave few instructions: order pizza, don't let him into their room, and mentioned he acted differently, often talking to himself or an imaginary friend named Agnes. One rainy afternoon, I was watching TV while Cody played on the floor with his toys. He kept using the name Agnes, pretending to play with another child. Then, one of his toys across the room, a little racing cube with a crank, activated by itself. It wasn't the kind of toy that turns on easily. I asked Cody how that happened. He looked right at me and said, "Agnes is playing with it." A shiver went down my spine. I picked up the toy and turned it off. Later, I was in the bathroom washing up when there was a knock at the door. "Cody," I said. I opened it. No one was there. I looked down the hall and saw a door at the end slowly creaking open. I turned off the bathroom light and walked into the room, expecting to find Cody trying to scare me. Instead, he was sitting on the bed in the far corner, just looking at me. I asked him who had pushed the door open. "Agnes," he said. Thoroughly freaked out, I picked him up and carried him to the living room, where we stayed until his parents got home. I never mentioned the strange events. When they called a few weeks later to ask me to sit again, I never called back. If these true stories got your heart racing, please give this video a like and subscribe to Winds of Thought for more tales that will make you double-check your locks.